The British media has a new strategy for smearing pro-Palestine activists and politicians. If they haven't said something controversial, just pretend they did. Now, we reported extensively on how Sky's Kay Burley lied about Palestine's ambassador to the UK, Hassam Zomlot, and now an old colleague of Kay's is at it again. Adam Bolton was Sky's political editor and now works at Times Radio. He was interviewing Shadow Cabinet Minister Peter Kyle.
Andy MacDonald attended the rally in London yesterday, the pro-Palestinian rally, and actually used the phrase about Palestine from the river to the sea, should he have the whip withdrawn.
That's the first time I've heard that. I think that people who use that phrase need to think very, very carefully about the impact that phrase has on Jewish people. Now, it's very hard for people who are not Jewish, and myself included, to truly understand the deep emotional, cultural connections to not just what happened with the Holocaust, but much deeper other persecutions that go much deeper into our history as a globe. So I call on everybody who uses that phrase to think very, very deeply. And some of the other imagery that I've seen,
and a Labour MP using it, should they continue to get the party whip?
I don't think that people should use that phrase because of the impact it has. And I think in a time when we as one nation has people who have a connection to both sides of this war, both sides need to be extremely sensitive to the cultural and the emotional connections that people have and the responses to it and the fear that people have about their own personal safety when certain slogans and when certain imagery is taken onto our streets.
Now, I don't agree with what Peter Kyle said there. From the river to the sea is basically a suggestion that there should be a one-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. So from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, that's a perfectly legitimate position, especially now that Israel's settlement expansion has made a two-state solution almost impossible. We should not say, it's anti-Semitic to want a one-state solution. That's ridiculous. That exchange was even more ridiculous, though, than it appeared. And that's because Andy MacDonald, so he's a former shadow minister, did not say what Adam Bolton said he said. Now, this is the relevant part of MacDonald's speech. He was speaking to a Palestine demonstration.
For far too long, Palestinians have been deprived of their basic human rights, their dignity and their freedom. We will not rest until we have justice. Until all people, Israelis and Palestinians, between the river and the sea, can live in peaceful liberty.
So Andy MacDonald actually said this: we will not rest until we have justice, until all people, Israelis and Palestinians, between the river and the sea, can live in peaceful liberty. Right? So what he said is actually consistent with a two-state solution, right? Saying Palestinians and Israelis will both be able to live in liberty between the river and the sea. Completely stupid. Another example, just as we talked about with Kay Burley, where someone tries to provoke a political controversy by making up what someone else said. And I am struggling to believe this. This broke just before we went live. There has been an update on this stupid story because Andy MacDonald has now been suspended from the Labour Party for saying what you just heard there. Now, a Labour Party spokesman told the newspaper this: the comments made by Andy MacDonald at the weekend were deeply offensive, particularly at a time of rising anti-Semitism, which has left Jewish people fearful for their safety. The chief whip has suspended the Labour whip from Andy MacDonald pending an investigation. Let me just repeat one more time what he said. We will not rest until we have justice, until all people, Israelis and Palestinians, between the river and the sea, can live in peaceful liberty. It's difficult for Keir Starmer to sort of surprise me in how ridiculous his leadership of the Labour Party is. But sacking someone for that, all Israelis, all Palestinians between the river and the sea can live in liberty. In what world is that not only should that not be offensive, that should be the baseline that we can all agree on.
That's right.
Some people, people who are sort of on the more, that Israel was always a colonial project, the whole of it, they'll say, no, why should Israelis feel free? Israel shouldn't exist. It's a colonial project. But if you're saying Israelis and Palestinians should be free here, you're accepting the existence of Israel. Like that should be, Rishi Sunak should be able to agree with that statement.
It should be the most incontrovertible statement one can make on this topic. It should be the most self-evidently good, morally praiseworthy, the least objectionable thing you can say is precisely what Andy McDonald has just been suspended for. And what I'd say, Michael, is of all the criticisms we made of Keir Starmer over the years, the various episodes and the incidents where people can go one way or another and say this is a complete political misjudgment or this is just morally outrageous, I think this takes the biscuit. It's awful. It is absolutely disgusting. And I think it does say something quite significant about the man and the political project he spearheads. This is somebody who I sincerely believe, although in terms of domestic politics, Labour is, for me, inarguably better than the Conservative Party, most certainly the least worst option. In terms of foreign policy, Michael, I sincerely believe a Labour government under Keir Starmer is more likely to take this country to war than the Conservative Party. That's just a fact as far as I'm concerned. Because when it comes to, for instance, what's going on right now, let's zoom away from Andy McDonald for one moment. Why isn't Labour calling for a ceasefire? Because Joe Biden hasn't. The whole point of the Keir Starmer project is to do precisely what the Americans do an hour later. So it's not just about taking power away from Labour Party members and concentrating it at Westminster, which is what's been cheered on by the political media establishment in this country. It's about outsourcing this country's foreign policy so nobody in this country makes it, but instead it's made in Washington. And at the same time, if you demur from that in any way, if you disagree, you'll be called a racist, a misanthrope, a bigot, a xenophobe, all of the above. And you certainly won't be given a fair hearing, due process, listened to judiciously or in a way that's broadly commensurate with a lawyer, let alone a human rights lawyer, for God's sake. So I think somebody who's this tyrannical, Michael, who's this averse to basic principles of fairness, or even just listening to what people say, as is the case with Andy McDonald, my view is he clearly shouldn't be the Prime Minister of this country. Clearly. If you think foreign policy concerning this country should be made by people in this country, you shouldn't like Mr. Starmer. And if you think that people should be judged fairly and certainly shouldn't be punished for something as commendable, this wasn't not objectionable, this was commendable. If you think people shouldn't be punished for this, then again, I'd say the same thing. And Michael, it does make you think. What kinds of statements would be prescribed or criminalized under a Starmer government? This statement said by Andy McDonald, if this is sufficient to suspend him, if somebody goes and says that at work under a Labour government and they get fired, are Labour going to support them? Because this is meant to be the party of workers' rights, remember? And he's not said anything remotely objectionable, as we both probably agree. Or will it become a criminal matter? This is a very serious point, Michael. We're looking at, I think, the most amoral person ever to lead a political party in this country. I seriously believe that. And I say that as somebody, by the way, who voted Labour in the May local elections and who's very open about the fact that Labour are a least worse or less worse option than the Conservatives. Clearly, the Conservatives have to go. I've never voted Tory in my life, but after 13 years, my goodness, they're in the mire. But we have to have our eyes open with this man, Michael. He's a very, very dangerous individual.
I'm just still so shocked by this, right? Between the river and the sea, now, whatever you say must just be are they just saying it's dog whistle? So even if you just say, between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea, I just want people to be as happy as possible, right? If that's my position, they say, whoa, you said between the river and the sea, that scares people. Out, you must be an anti-Semite. It's so bizarre. Between the river and the sea, I hope people get along. Between the river and the sea, I want people to be happy. Between the river and the sea, I want people to be free. He even said Israelis, right? He is calling for a two-state solution, or a binational state, I suppose one could say, if you're saying Israelis and Palestinians.
The nature of the Labour Right project as well, Michael, is that they don't believe in parliamentary sovereignty. It's part of the reason why they really hated Brexit, by the way. They don't believe in parliamentary sovereignty. They certainly don't believe in ordinary people having power. We saw that with the complete, the instinctive animosity they hold to membership democracy in the Labour Party. So where do they think power should reside? They think power should reside with quangos. Who would be leading these quangos? Who would be setting the agenda with these quangos? From the OBR to the EHRC to God knows what, the information commissioner, all staff with effectively water carriers, lackeys, has-beens and could-have-beens from the Labour Right. That's how it operates. I don't want my free speech curtailed my ability to freely associate curtailed by some water carrier for this little tin pot tyrant who doesn't seem to be qualified for such a prestigious job as leading the Labour Party. And he's got this job on the basis of lies, mistruths, and the fact he puts a tub of Brill cream in his head every morning. It's outrageous, Michael. This is people need to get wise to this. This man is an incredible threat to your liberty and your freedom. It's Andy McDonald being suspended for his job today. It could be you being sacked from your job for saying something as completely okay as this tomorrow. This man could be the Prime Minister. Take this seriously. They're being very open about who they are, their political commitments, and how little you matter. If they could, they'd take away your bank account, your right to free speech, and even your right to vote if they could. Believe me, because these people do not believe in democracy. They said it with regards to the Brexit referendum. They said it undermining Corbyn for 5 years. They said it in terms of trying to undermine Brexit again in 2019. They'll do it again and again and again and again. They do not believe in popular sovereignty, free speech, or liberty of the individual. Wake up.
This show is only possible thanks to the generosity of people like you, our audience. We appreciate your super chats, but it's regular donations via our website that we're relying on to fund our work. And if you too want to fund independent media, then you can do for just £1 a month, or from just £1 a month. Our traditional ask was for the equivalent of 1 hour's wage a month, but anything you can afford is very much appreciated. The link to do so is novaramedia.com/support, and that link is in the description box below.